We have always been a country very much of the New World, while still with a big part of our heads, a big chunk of our cultural imagination, stuck to the Old World. The next half century is going to change that model, whether we like it or not. The United States has the 5th largest number of native Spanish speakers in the world, only behind Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, and Spain. We have, once again, in the post-Hart-Celler immigration world, reached the percentage of foreign-born people in the population that we had 100 years ago, in the early years of the 20th century, when we wrapped up 50 years of massive European migration just before the First World War. But of course, since the country is so much bigger than it was then, the number of foreign-born is much bigger too. As this has happened, just as we entered a period of frightening economic contraction, we're now scratching our heads, trying to figure out what this all means to who we are and who we're going to be. And as a consequence, what this means about our relationships with the rest of the world. For the coming 30 years, will ours be a culture that stretches, that makes room for new heroes, for new stories, for new ideas, for new sounds and tastes? Or will we hunker down and mutter about the clash of civilizations, question who's really an American and who really belongs? Can Americans wrap their head around a future that makes this country still distinct from places everywhere, at the same time as it becomes more Latin, more Asian, more African? A world that's getting more complicated and more interesting by the day. Covering it means keeping track of more trends in more places than it ever did before. Talking to our audiences means trying to keep them engaged, trying to keep track of changing political and economic trends, revolutions that come in green and orange and velvet, a world where you no longer tell your children to finish their vegetables because starving Chinese children would love to have them, but you instead dress your own children head to toe in clothing made in China before they hunker down to play with toys that are also all made in China. And China has a 10% increase in the number of obese people year after year. You will live your lives, and your children will live their lives in a country being culturally transformed by inflows from all over the world. The question for you individually and as aspiring members of the cadre of university-educated people of this country is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to embrace it? Mourn the loss of Euro-American dominance? Celebrate your own group while knowing as little as possible about the rest? We really are all in this together. And whether you feel the high levels of immigration over the last generation has meant things that are good, bad, or indifferent for the United States, wherever you fall down on the broad continuum of opinion on these questions, this is coming straight for your head. You've got to understand what it means to your family and your country, because this is the world that you are going to be leaders in. If the recent arrivals and the newcomers can't rise in America, they're not going to assimilate either. Cultural isolation goes right along with long hours, low education, low levels of civic involvement, alienation from acculturating institutions like churches and schools. One thread you hear through the Tea Party narrative: the throngs holding Obama as the Joker signs, Obama as a foreigner posters. A thread that also runs through Glenn Beck's recent get-together on the National Mall. A frequent motif of all those outpourings is the idea of restoration, a narrative of loss, of anxiety about, quote, losing my country, or needing to, quote, get my country back, or simply, what happened to my country? These are poignant complaints about a sense of change that the speakers have a hard time putting their finger on. Very hard for them to define it, but they know what it is. Those people are going to have a hard time coming to terms with this next America.